Hello and welcome to Vision 2060, a future focused podcast series supported by the US Department of State's IVLP Impact Initiative. And I'm your host, Samridhi Shoor. We have Mr. Ashutosh Dutt Sharma. All of our listeners would like to know I've heard about robotics. What does cobotics mean?
Cobotics, it's a very interesting concept. We talk about robotics a lot, but cobotics is a short form of collaborative robotics.
Cobotics is basically something that would help us achieve Star Wars like scenarios or Interstellar that showed that really hi fi science fiction environment. Not here to promote it, but still interesting, very
Yes,
interesting.
Yes.
And they have a very different way of thinking. They're not raised by cartoons anymore, they're raised by Instagram, they're raised by Facebook. And this is the generation which has a lot of noise coming in, and they have their own way of thinking.
So I would agree a bit and not agree a bit as well.
Okay. Do you see India building this kind of infrastructure in the near future, or will it take a few more decades? When I say near future, it's a few months.
India might be doing very good with respect to maybe quantum computing or semiconductors in near future, and some of the talent which is available in this pool stays back in the country.
Like Kokomo was doing. They were not asking Korean people to speak English. Rather, they were teaching their community to learn Korean and introduce Korean cuisine in their village.
I'm very, I would say, bullish about it, that if there is a requirement or if there is a necessity, technology will come to the rescue.
Hello and welcome to Vision 2060, a future focused podcast series supported by the US Department of State's IVLP Impact Initiative and managed by the Meridian Center for Global Leadership based in Washington, D.C. And I'm your host, Samridhi Shoor. We have Mr. Ashutosh Dutt Sharma, CEO of iHub Foundation for Robotics, IHFC at IIT Delhi, one of India's premier technology innovation hubs under NMICPS mission supported by Department of Science and Technology. Hi Ashutosh, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
It's a pleasure to have you with us in the inaugural episode of Vision 2060.
So, Vision 2060 is a beautiful vision, and having a podcast series which is going to be useful for a lot of viewers of ours is an amazing thing.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I know that you've worked with Airtel, Samsung, all these big names, MNCs, and then you moved to a public focused organization, which is iHub Foundation for Robotics, IHFC. And it is, I would say, powered by Department of Science and Technology, but it's supported by the government. So how does it feel to transition from an MNC to a government owned entity? And like, how does that change your perspective about how the Indian workforce is being developed? Because that's the focus of IHFC, if I'm not wrong.
First of all, I think about the experience. So, it's a very unique one, I must say. For almost like a couple of decades, I worked for corporates, which included, yes, Airtel, Samsung. And during almost like last 5 years that I've worked with HFC, the experience is very different. And I'll tell you the reason. See, when you work for a corporate, it's a profit driven organization. So
Right.
when you are a part of that organization, you are all oriented towards that motive and that objective of the organization. So you are a small cog in the wheel of that organization and you are working towards that motive. When I talk about this new assignment of mine, I think this is more a purpose driven assignment wherein the government of India, they are trying to do something meaningful for the country, and it has been set up as a part of that particular vision. As you are aware of it, it's a part of a national mission which a government has set up, and they have set up 25 such hubs. And the area that we work on is to translate the research into something meaningful for the society. Now, this is the purpose that we have been set up. So, when you work for a purpose, a not for profit organization, the approach, the experience is very different. Yes, I pick up a lot of things from my experience in the corporate world because this is how this new
Right,
concept has
of
been
course.
structured. But the experience is very unique.
Okay, that's interesting. Tell me about what exactly is cobotics. I think all of our listeners would like to know. I've heard about robotics. What does cobotics mean?
Cobotics, it's a very interesting concept. We talk about robotics a lot, but cobotics is a short form of collaborative robotics. And the concept suggests that humans and machines will be working together. And the technologies that enable that is something which gets encompassed in cobotics.
Okay.
Now, robotics as a concept, it suggests that machines will be working standalone, but that's not the case in any case. And when humans work very close to the machines, it becomes imperative to to see that humans and machines understand each other as well. They also see how's that they can become complementary with respect to each other. Otherwise, when we look at robotics and its applications, there are a lot of times when you see people getting agitated, even
Right.
creating a lot of noise about it, that jobs are being replaced.
Yeah.
But if we say that this is one technology which can help humans reach where they have not, I think that
Right.
changes the entire perspective. So I think that is what we are trying to instill as a part of these technologies which are enabling the humans and machines to work together.
So, from what I understand, is cobotics is basically something that would help us achieve Star Wars like scenarios, or Interstellar, or Star Trek, or anything else that showed that really hi fi science fiction environment where robots are doing our bidding and we have all these interplanetary systems and we have access to all the resources and all the tech that can be imagined, at least at this point of time. So, cobotics is something that would enable that.
That's one aspect of it.
Okay.
So
Interesting. Very
yes,
interesting.
yes, and so it's like going beyond our planet.
Okay.
So it makes sense, as
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, that what humans cannot do. If you have to breathe oxygen, then
Right.
there are very limited places wherein you can actually go.
Okay.
At least in our universe, you would not
Yeah, I
have a lot
mean,
of
we
places
live
which
in
is
Delhi.
conducive to a human in an environment. Wherein, if there is a machine which can do a same task that a human is supposed to do, then it becomes much easier for us. We are talking
Absolutely.
about minerals. All these countries, they're fighting about minerals, whether it is China, Russia, most of them. This is one hot topic. Now, if you get an access to some of these planets and the kind of rich minerals that they possess, and if you are able to bring them to Earth and utilize whatever way you would want to,
Right.
who would not like to do that? We are making Earth richer. So
Actually.
so that's how it is. But as I mentioned, it is just one of the aspects. There are a lot of things which you see in our societal settings which can be changed with this particular technology domain. When we talk about things like scavenging, humans still doing that even in this age wherein technology has taken us to moon or maybe a lot of other planets including Mars. People still doing that
Kind of
job
menial
on
labor.
their own.
Yeah.
So why can't we help them? There are a lot of things which machines are enabling, including, say, for example, even surgeries. All most of the countries, they have shortage of surgeons, able surgeons. And if there are machines which can help them not doing these surgeries on their own, but to help them avoid the fatigue that the doctors undergo when they are in the operation theater day in and day out, is something that these machines can definitely enable.
Today we have new workforce coming into this various different sectors. Actually, we have Gen Z, we have millennials, and they have a very different way of thinking. They're not raised by cartoons anymore. They're raised by Instagram, they're raised by Facebook, and this is the generation which has a lot of noise coming in, and they have their own way of thinking. Everyone has a different perspective. That has always been true, but right now there's a culture of following blindly whoever is most popular, whoever has the most following, whoever is able to get through your feed and giving you all those insights. So how do you get to these people? How do you forge the next generation of innovators? Because safety and being ethical is something that starts at that level. These are the people who will actually make new things and make new innovations, hopefully for the good of the mankind. So how do you make that possible?
And I'm very hopeful and very certain that that'll be good for the
You work
humankind.
with a lot of students as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
You have a lot of
And there's a
programs.
stark difference between when I was their age
Yeah.
and when I see them. You rightly mentioned, I think they have very easy access to Instagram, social media, and all this stuff. And I think all thanks to internet. So when I was growing up, the internet was also not one of the accessible things. But today they have this information available at their fingertips. So as I mentioned, technology is a double-edged sword. You'll see technology benefiting, so internet has a lot of good use. But some ways or the other, the information access to the at an early age is and especially unrestricted, is something which is not a very good thing. But when I look at this generation in totality, what I see is that the maturity level is much higher as compared to when I was their age. Maybe because the information access is easy and they pick up things much faster. We were allowed to be a child for a much longer duration as compared to this generation. And When I talk to some of these youngsters, the kind of clarity that they come with, it's amazing. Maybe people in my generation, they were grappling with the idea of what career to choose and which direction to take and which job to join or get into innovation. But these guys, they are very clear at a very early age. So they say that I want to get into a startup. So that is how, the conversation will begin. They will not think about job. They'll be dedicated towards that. They would also come up with the idea as well. They would say that I want to get into something which is related to defense or, for example, healthcare. So they would have all these things sorted out at a very early age. I think to a certain extent, it is good when it comes to innovation. So that is, I would say. Second, there's another change which has come, at least in the last couple of decades or three, is that the kind of insecurity that people in my generation used to have, that kind of insecurity is not existent at this juncture. And that enables them to take those risks, which is very important from an innovation point of view. Again, I link innovation with the development of that particular economy or geography. And that is what is going to see us, or we'll be able to see a much evolved or a developed country in the next couple of decades. Maybe by 2660, when we hit, which is another 35 years down the line,
Yeah,
we would be the most developed country in the world.
it's not that far away as well. It's weird to think that we are closer to 2030 than we are to 2020, thanks to COVID. But that being said, you mentioned a lot of different things that this generation is very secure. So I have one very specific question in mind because there's a trend and there's also a certain perspective in the Indian diaspora, I would say, across the globe, that if you move outside, you are doing significantly well, specifically to the West. If you move out of the country, you move out of India, you are one of the winners in you're a winner in your life and you have achieved something. Do you think that mindset has changed when it comes to Gen Z and millennials, that they want to be here in India and build here in India? Or do you think that's still the case with them, that they want to go outside and maybe explore or do a job, take up a job with some MNC and then just settle down there rather than being here?
So I would agree a bit and not agree a bit as well.
Okay.
This movement from a place wherein you have originated to a place which has higher amount of opportunity, it exists within the country as well. When you see even India, there are people who move from villages to towns, people from town to the cities, even people from villages to the cities. Especially, again, I would give it to technology. The way this concept of global villages happened, it is no more west or east, or so it's like going out exploring better opportunities. So that is what the thought process has been. But what I would say that in the last at least a decade or so, the kind of opportunities that this generation is getting within the country is much higher. Also, again, I would give a credit to technology. The way we are able to collaborate sitting in two different places in the world, that has improved this thought process quite a bit. So we have a concept of global capability centers,
Yeah.
wherein a lot of MNCs, including United States, they have set up centers in the country to help them with respect to their processes, research. Earlier, there used to be concept of business process outsourcing. So a lot of these capability centers exist even today, right? But this trend, I'm sure, is going to increase. Reason being that the technology has enabled this collaboration quite a bit. So in my opinion, this is something that this generation also sees and tries and sticks to the country. Also, with respect to innovation, I think we are more lively than ever when it comes to innovation. I can talk about IIT Delhi. This batch, which is just passed out, they there was close to about 12 or 13% people who have not opted for placement,
Okay,
which
interesting.
is quite a
Why is that?
significant number
Yeah.
because they want to get into research and innovation. They want to do something like a startup. And
Okay.
when I look at the other 87% people, a lot of them will get into research, and which again leads to innovation.
Yeah.
Some of them would definitely get into jobs somewhere in India, somewhere outside. But as far as trend is concerned, and that's where the question was, it has changed quite a bit in the last decade or so.
So let me ask you a very difficult question. Is India the next hotspot for doing any sort of innovation? or do you still see West or specifically US or other European countries to be getting the major chunk of the Indian talent? Because we have the best engineers and scientists and researchers in the world. And there is no question about that. Some of our researchers are out there doing some of the most groundbreaking researches even now. So, do you feel that India would become the leading hotspot which will attract global talent as well? Or do you still feel that it is somewhat like a few decades away?
So I mentioned about this concept of global village.
Yeah.
So it's not about attracting talent, having talent, sending talent at
Yeah.
all. It's about you being where, and then how's that you are able to contribute. So
Okay.
as I mentioned, there are a lot of people who used to migrate to other countries to work. That is not the case anymore. You
Okay.
can still be here and contribute to that same economy. So it will become the driving force will be innovation. Somebody who is able to attract that talent will
Yeah, we
be able
still
to
have
get
that.
them.
We have Zoom calls and Google Meets across
Yes,
time
but
zones.
this has grown in the last 5 years. I think
Yeah.
there were a lot of
I think
negative things
COVID
about
played a
COVID,
big, yeah.
but I think this one aspect has grown significantly in the last 5 years, wherein people they are not hesitant to collaborate online. Earlier, it used to be like the last option for collaboration. Today, it's the preferred option for collaboration. So, when we look at this aspect, I think some of these changes will happen. The outlook is changing, the perspective is changing. When we talk about us as a country, I think there's no dearth of talent. I think you mentioned that. When we look at a country like United States, and we saw that together, I think the kind of infrastructure, the kind of ecosystem that they have built, it's very strong, very conducive to these kind of innovations, and that's the reason they have been able to attract a lot much talent as compared to any other country in the world with respect to innovation and some of these innovative projects. When this concept of workforce is changing, wherein you can collaborate sitting somewhere else in the world as well, I think that ecosystem, that infrastructure can be utilized in a much more meaningful way. I was talking to a US MNC, a person from US MNC, and I was giving this example saying that if someone migrates from India to US, it's a cost to US economy as well. But if that same person staying in India, closer to their extended family, can contribute at a much, I would say, uh, higher level or contribute much more because the kind of environment that they are used to. And I think a lot of Indians, they don't want to go out because of multiple reasons. Since the job opportunities are there, they tend to do that. But I think that particular aspect from an ROI perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Why would the culture of global capability centers, as I talked about, should not grow much more in the country? And any MNC, any organization, whether it is based in India, outside India, they can always make use of that.
Okay. So now, like you've mentioned that we both saw that US has an incredible infrastructure when it comes to enabling the kind of innovation technology that we need in the next few decades. So we saw the kind of infrastructure that they have in Pittsburgh. We had that Carnegie Mellon showcase where it was a robotics center, if I'm not wrong. And then we were in Arizona as well. They have a few hubs there, and semiconductor development is also taking boom in that particular part of the world. But do you see India building this kind of infrastructure in the near future, or will it take a few more decades? When I say near future, it's a few months.
No, few months is not possible.
Yes.
When you say infrastructure, I think that is again only one of the aspects.
Yeah.
It's not only infrastructure that supports. So, for example,
Mm.
even we would have some number of institutes, some number of cities wherein a similar or at least a very conducive infrastructure is available. But I think there are a lot more things which go into a successful innovation or making that innovation successful rather. And that includes the way people look at it, the kind of risk capabilities that people have, the way people look at new products or new things coming their way, the way people look at the products made within that specific country. So lot many aspects, they are required to make this kind of a conducive environment. Also, one thing that I picked up during my IVLP program, and I really liked that about United States, is the way they work very coherently to ensure some of these enablers to work together and make something happen. I remember we were in Kokomo. They were
Right.
setting up this
Kokomo,
Samsung
yes.
factory, and the way this local ecosystem was working with the central policymakers or that state policymakers and the organization itself to ensure that some of these people who are supposed to migrate from South Korea to USA, they are getting a conducive environment to be there. They feel like home, and to make that a successful venture, right? We were, for example, in Arizona, which is upcoming semiconductor hub. There, the university's curriculum, some of the very specific or designated centers, they were working in line with the policy of the government of United States. So I think some of these things, me as an individual, I have picked up,
Yeah.
and I feel this is something which we should look at as a positive in an economy and should learn from that. So I think, but building this kind of a culture or this kind of an ecosystem or this an environment, it takes time.
One of the most burning question that I have now, you just took an example of Kokomo. I was there and I also loved the way the local community was working to make a conducive environment for the workers who will be coming to this part of the world in US from South Korea, which is very different when we look at it culturally. Now, India, when we talk about India, it's already a very diverse nation, right? We have several different languages, we have different way people live their lives. Are people different culturally? But the language barrier that new innovators are facing, and I'll take my example for it. I was looking to set up a new plant for Aegion, the company that I work with. So for that, we looked at various different locations in the country towards the south. There was Tamil Nadu, there was Karnataka, there was also Maharashtra. Now, these are the areas which are developing industrial hubs, and all the big PSUs and other big industrial companies are there. Okay, but when we look at the workforce there, the laborers who are working there, working with them has their own challenges, to put it lightly. India has always been proud of the diversity that we have, and I'm proud of the diversity that we have. And we have always been welcoming to everyone. We have this, I think, shlok, which is Vasudeva Kutumbakam, like the whole world is my home, or the whole world is my family. So when I look at people asking each other to speak a certain language, shouldn't the community take the efforts to help them assimilate, like Kokomo was doing? They were not asking Korean people to speak English. Rather, they were teaching the community to learn Korean and introduce Korean cuisine in their village.
No, we
So,
should. So that
yeah,
goes without saying.
yes.
So I would not say that we are very far behind with respect to that. I think again, English as a language comes to our rescue a lot of times,
Yes.
wherein we see. So we have a lot of migration from one state to the other within the
Exactly.
country as well,
Yes.
and it's not like that if you go to, for example, Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or some of these cities like Chennai or Bangalore, you would not find North Indian restaurant or a Punjabi restaurant. You will always find that. But see, there is a difference, right? The difference is the entire machinery at a local level is working for something. And then when we talk about India as a country, people, they identify this opportunity, being very entrepreneurial, they get into that and then flourish. So it's not by design, it's because of the entrepreneurial spirit of the country that this particular thing happens. This conducive, creating a conducive environment doesn't happen proactively, but happens as after effect. So if you would see a lot of North Indian people migrating to a certain city in South India, then you will suddenly see some very good restaurants coming out of that locality wherein these people have gone to. So it's, when I mentioned about United States, this is something which is proactive. So that's the difference. So that's one. Second, I would again bring technology into picture. Language is one thing, but language can be perceived in two ways. One is you're speaking a language, one is you're reading a language. So while speaking a language can still be managed, because you can have people who know two languages in terms of speaking. But at an individual level, say if I am visiting, say Chennai, you will find a lot of signboards, signs on the road, which will be written in Tamil. Now, I, as a person, I understand a few words of Tamil in
Oh,
terms of
great.
spoken language, but I don't understand Tamil as a language written on a signboard or a milestone. It's a very difficult thing for me. But I'll talk about one of the startups that is working with us. They have created an AI enabled glass. So if you look at it, it'll convert the written language into a language of your choice. So you create a setting saying that I am comfortable with English or I am comfortable with Hindi, And if the glass sees a Tamil script written, it'll convert it to Hindi or English and then say there's translator like Google Translator which does this with language already. And I'm talking about one of the starters, but there are many companies which are working on this kind of a technology to enable that. So I think, again, coming back to the same point of a global village, these are the things which only technology can enable. And I'm very, I would say, bullish about it, that if there is a requirement or if there is a necessity, technology will come to the rescue.
Okay, here's hoping. I really want it. It should happen. It is going to be in my favor as well. So, now for the next question, do you think that the workforce, just to be able to work in a certain environment, would prefer moving out of India when it comes to collaboration? Of course, a lot of companies, banks have given out ultimatums to their employees saying that we want you back or you can be fired. Elon Musk has already done that, to put it lightly. So, do you feel that Indian researchers, engineers, all the scientists would prefer working from outside of India rather than working in
See,
India?
I look at it in a very different way. So it works in a way wherein people will move wherein opportunities are. And I'm not talking about only Indians here. I'm talking about, again, global workforce. There are a lot of countries who have outsourced their manufacturing to one specific country, say, for example, China, or for example, now lately coming up, Vietnam, because of the cost advantages. Even India, for that matter. I talked about global capability centers, which is more people oriented, but even a lot of manufacturing facilities, including Apple's, they are coming to India. Micron is setting up a industry in India. We are going to have a semiconductor plant in very close to Noida, and with all some of these with the US collaboration, in fact. So this is something which will continue to happen, and people will move where opportunities are. So if I'm skilled for manufacturing and there is a heaven for manufacturing, right now I would consider China as that, and I'm being very blunt here. People would like to go there in case they feel manufacturing is something that they would want to do. If India wants to grow in manufacturing, if we want to keep the talent which wants to be in manufacturing, India would develop as a country as a manufacturing hub, or we would put more focus on manufacturing. If we put more focus on service, people will start moving towards service. So I think this is something that policymakers have to decide what is the direction that we as a country want to get into. I'm privileged to be a part of this mission wherein we are working on creating translated products out of the research which is happening. I don't know, a lot of people are not aware of it, but we figure amongst the top 3 to top 5. So we keep on changing our ranks with some of these countries in terms of number of research papers, publications, research output, so to say. But when it comes to innovation index, we are not amongst even top 30. Rather, I think last year we were some 38 or 39. Now, there's a big gap wherein research and translating that research into something meaningful for the society. And I think that's the reason this mission was set up.
Okay.
And this is the direction that government has taken. So if government sees this as a important aspect for growing the economy or for moving the workforce in this direction, they are taking those steps. And what I see is if we are able to deliver well with respect to the objectives that we have been set up with, there is no reason why we would not be a hub which will be translating research at a much higher pace as compared to what we are doing today. So I think these are the things which enable or decide the way workforce moves. And I think that's what answers your question as to how is that this movement will take place. So if there are people who are oriented towards research, innovation, and if we are able to create a conducive environment for them here itself, I think we'll be able to retain a lot more people who would be inclined to work in this kind of a domain within the country itself.
Okay. So, this brings me to the question that what are the three main policy decisions that should be taken by the government, according to you, that would help Indian workforce stay in India and the kind of talent that we need for the next gen innovation in order to retain that? What are the three main
So I
policy
think
points?
that might be, again, that's not the sole objective, right? So the objective is that we should be in a position to give them opportunities. And when it comes to research and innovation, I think there are a lot of initiatives that are already taken, and there are some things that you will hear very soon. So lately, I think July 1st itself, I think a couple of weeks before, there was a cabinet approval which came in for a funding called RDI funding. It's a huge fund which Government of India has set up, almost 1 lakh crores. INR for 5 years, so 20,000 crores per year. And this fund is targeted towards building the ecosystem of research in collaboration between academia and industry. These kind of things, they spur the kind of environment that I'm talking about in terms of getting researchers an opportunity within the country itself. But it does not mean that we'll have every researcher working in some of these domains to stay back in the country as well, because again, every country has its own attraction points. Again, a global village concept. I would like to go to a place which suits my technology. For example, India might be doing very good with respect to maybe quantum computing or semiconductors in near future, and some of the talent which is available in this pool stays back in the country. There might be other countries who are doing better with respect to manufacturing technology or robotics, for example. Those countries would attract that kind of a talent wherever they are in the world.
Got it. Now that you've positioned India as a country which might be doing better in quantum and semiconductor, do you think that maybe we are moving towards being a manufacturing focused country rather than we've always had a very big manufacturing hub. We already have a lot of manufacturers. Our costs are at par with some of the Chinese manufacturers as well. But honestly, I think services and IT has been a sector which has been favored by the people, by the government for far too long now. Do you think that India needs to move towards some other industry in order to get that position and get that $5 trillion economy mark as well?
I think, see, we'll have, so it's not one economy, right? So
Yeah.
it's three enablers for economy, right?
Yeah.
One is agriculture, second is
Mm.
industry or manufacturing,
Mm.
and third is service. We have to focus on all the three.
Mm.
You're talking about maybe industry or manufacturing and service, I would say even agriculture. We have to focus on all the three to ensure that the country grows at that kind of a pace, which helps us reach that goal. So I would say the focus has to be on all the three. You're right. Service sector is something which we have grown. Again, it's like a post facto. It's an opportunity that we identified. We grew in that sector. From a policy point of view, I think we have to focus on all the three. Maybe a little bit more on manufacturing, in my opinion, as well, because lately we have seen a lot of manufacturing happening in countries like China, Vietnam, and all. While we have a great advantage with respect to the kind of workforce that we have here, if we are, I think, positive, and there are a lot of things which are happening, in fact, with respect to some of these policies, making in India, make for India, self-reliant India, a lot of initiatives, PLI scheme by government of India, some of these things happening in the same direction. But as I mentioned, it takes time. So there is an intent from the government, but changing the behavior or changing the way we think or we do things, I think it is going to take some time. The trust building thing takes time. So I think we are moving in that direction. But to answer your question, yes, focus has to be there on manufacturing, but not only on manufacturing. We continue to be strong in service. We continue to focus on agriculture too.
Very nice answer. Okay, so Ashutosh, given the change in the perspective of the current workforce and the young innovators, how do you think the US India collaboration shaping up?
See, in my opinion, it's growing stronger. So
Okay.
we have always been two allies which have worked very closely with each other, whether it's workforce or technologies. And you talked about the changing workforce, the way workforce behavior is changing. I think the countries are also adapting to that. I talked about, I think, GCC. So that's the concept which has been there. And some of these concepts are growing further. And not only that, we hear news about Apple setting up a manufacturing unit here. We have Micron coming here, setting up industry, technology transfer from GE. Some of these initiatives, I think they are making this bond stronger. Some of the government initiatives, again, for example, earlier there was ISET. Now we have something called Trust. We are working very closely as compared to some of the previous years as well. I personally know some of the initiatives wherein there has been a lot of startup exchange. There has been a lot of startups which have experienced the kind of problems that each of the country faces. Now, these kind of exposure, these kind of programs really make us aware of the other country. So I think there are a lot of meaningful activities which are happening in this direction, and I see both these countries growing together in near future.
That's amazing. So if India has to learn one thing from US and if US has to learn one thing from India, what would that be?
It's a very difficult one.
Okay.
See, when it comes to United States,
Mm.
I think the way they have structured themselves with respect to nurturing innovation.
Right.
is something that we need to learn from. And I'll share my personal experience during IVLP, wherein I saw the way the schooling, then the graduation, then the environment to innovate or to work with organizations or work or create a startup, work as a part of a startup ecosystem. The venture capitalist economy or venture capitalist ecosystem which exists there, I think it is very conducive to innovation. People are encouraged to take risks, encouraged to experiment with multiple things, which has not been existing in India for quite some time. So I think that is something that we can definitely pick from United States. When it comes to agility or adaptability, I think these are some of the traits in terms of workforce which probably we excel at. And I talk about myself, I like Indian food, and a lot of people like Indian food. And when they go to any other country, including China, United States, Japan, what they crave most for is the Indian food. But still, we have seen people staying there for generations. I think so. That is what I call adaptability, and it's a very important aspect when it comes to workforce. So that is one thing I think we can always pick up from India.
So before we wrap up today, what is your vision for the India's workforce? And how can US and India collaboration sort of develop, come together to co-create that mission or that vision into reality?
So again, I think I'll bank upon that same concept that started
Mm.
with global village. See, what I would like to see workforce doing is that we go beyond boundaries, right? So today we call it like US or India, some of these things. When it comes to innovation, I think innovation crosses boundaries. We have a lot of good innovations which have been created by a country like, for example, say Israel or Russia, and they are utilized across the world, or some of the innovations which have originated from the United States, which are used by the entire globe. Now, this is something that I would like to see in the workforce as well, right? So, we should be easily mobile. We should be in a position to contribute wherever we can. And it's not something which is specific to a country. It should be like it should become a global economy wherein people are allowed to move wherever they would want to depending upon their interest. They are also absorbed back. And this is something that I learned from my previous organization, Airtel. When I joined Airtel, I was pretty young, I would say. And one thing that used to bother me earlier was that we used to get our job profiles changed almost every 2 3 years. So there
Okay.
used to be a lot of restructuring. You would be assigned to some other job, and it used to be very uncomfortable when I started with. But when I look at it now, I think what it made me was very adaptable to some of these things which are happening around me. It makes me more inclusive to what somebody else is doing. When you are part of a job, you feel that the other person might not be contributing as much as you are doing. But when you go to the other side of the table, then you see that these are the challenges that these guys would have been facing, which I never envisaged. So this kind of an experience, this kind of a exposure helped me grow as a professional. Now, put this setting at a global level. Now, if this is the kind of flexibility that the entire workforce gets, I think we as a workforce will be much evolved as compared to what we are today. We would not be labeled as a manufacturing nation or a service nation. All of us should be labeled as innovative workforce. So this is what my dream is. And I'm sure with what we are trying to do, we would at least be able to make certain amount of impact in the people that we are trying to work with.
Well, that was great. I think this is an amazing vision to have. And I'm sure in the near future that we will be able to achieve that. Maybe not in the near future, then in a few decades. It will be there. Vision 2060, right?
Yes, it should happen much before that, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
it would.
Yes.
Hopefully, yes. So, coming to our last question, and this has been a question I think that a lot of young innovators and students would like to know, and the upcoming workforce, what should they focus on? You said that this generation has a lot of clarity. You would be surprised that there's a lot of noise and very few are actually able to catch the signal. So they have so many options that they are spoiled with it. In fact, this has become a problem in today's generation. What should they focus on? What are the five main things that you suggest to this generation to focus on if they're planning a career for the next 5 or 10 years? It's longer than that,
No, I would not like to
but still.
prophesize here. I would always give this suggestion to
Okay. Keep
any
a very
student,
yeah.
and even to my son, I talk about the same thing. We need to follow our passion.
Okay.
See, if you are able to follow your passion, then you will excel in that particular domain. Now, the big question is, how do you identify that? I think that is what makes a lot of people confused, people in my generation too, every generation, I would say. But with the kind of clarity that this generation brings along with themselves, the kind of information level that they have for a lot of these things, I think they should be able to make that decision much earlier as compared to what we were able to do. So that's what my feeling is. But again, I think to identify where your passion lies, I think you should be open to learn, unlearn, and learn again. So you should try and experiment with a lot of things. You try and get yourself immersed into multiple things that come across to you as things making confusing, making this decision to be made harder. So you need to maybe dip yourselves a little bit into all those options that you have in mind which confuse you, and see which excites you, which one or two options excite you, and then make that decision basis that. So I think if you have found your passion, then it'll be very easy for you to excel with respect to that. And that is the only thing that I would like to say to this new generation as well.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Ashutosh, for being here today. I think this was an incredibly rich and future forward conversation, and your insights are going to serve as a guiding light as we build India's innovation driven workforce.
Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today and stay tuned for the next episode of Vision 2060.